Tonight, the life and confessions of a paedophile serial killer.
I'm a beast, I admit it. I'm an animal. I will screw any little girl. I don't give a damn who she is and whose daughter she is.
He has murdered 3 children and wrecked the lives of at least half a dozen families.
He has told us that if he was released, that he would kill. He would kill again. So that man is a danger and always will remain a danger. He is every parent's nightmare.
A predator who escaped justice for 30 years after clues were missed in a violent double murder.
How would you entice the child into Carla?
Excuse me, little miss. Don't I know you? Don't think so. What's your name? Barbara, Mary, Carol, Susan, whatever. Oh, you're so-and-so's little girl, I know you. Do you want a lift? I'll give you a lift. Oh, yes, please. Oh, as we're driving away, do you want some sweets? Oh, yes, please. So you go in the shop and you're with her and let her pick her own sweeties. Yeah. Come out, she's already been paid.
Right, payment in advance, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, payment in advance.
Right.
In March 1970, the search for 2 of his victims sparked a massive police hunt in Enfield, North London. 2 children were snatched off the street in broad daylight and simply vanished. The bodies of Susan Blatchford, aged 11, and Gary Hanlon, aged 12, were discovered in a copse near their home 11 weeks later. Fleet Street called the 2 school friends the Babes in the Wood. It's taken 30 years to finally solve the mystery surrounding their murders.
Susan came round and knocked, and she said, "Is Gary there?" I said, "Yeah." And Gary went out and talked to her outside. And he had his football under his arm, and I said, "You're not allowed to go down the road." So he said, "All right then, Mum." I said, "Your dinner will be ready soon." And I looked out the door and he was gone. They were both gone. That's the last time I saw him. I went out, I looked down the road, but he'd gone. He'd completely gone.
In charge of the case was Chief Inspector Leonard Nipper Reid, Scotland Yard's top criminal investigator. It was Nipper's first case following the jailing of London gangsters Ronnie and Reggie Cray. In a career spanning 40 years, the Babes in the Wood investigation was the only murder inquiry to defeat him.
It was the 31st of March, it was 1970, and it was my birthday. And so every year since, I've remembered only too clearly the day that these 2 children just disappeared from the face of the earth. These were 2 very young children, and so right from the beginning, I attacked this as a major inquiry. I saw the parents, of course, at an early stage, and soon formed a very sympathetic and emotional relationship with them, really, in fact, more than I should have done.
Just for those few years I had Susan, to me that is why she's my unforgettable girl, a special baby. When she was born, she had the cord round her neck 3 or 4 times. I believe that that baby in heaven chooses to come to you. And she chose me, knowing what was going to happen to her eventually.
Within 3 weeks of Gary and Susan's disappearance, the police had followed up more than 200 sightings of the pair, some of them hoaxes, all to no avail. The mothers of the missing children appealed for help from the public.
I think they're either being held prisoner or they're trapped somewhere.
I think
I know
so.
my boy would come home if he could.
It's the
I
same
know
as
he would.
Susan. There's someone that they knew and trusted that knows something.
Please send them home.
It was thought at the beginning maybe they ran away together, but I discounted that very early on because they didn't really know each other. We caused roadblocks to be set up. When that proved uneventful, we extended the search to cover the whole of the country. We employed divers to search the rivers and the canals. There were reservoirs, these great enormous King George and the William Girling reservoirs. Trains that had gone through, barges that had gone through, were all traced and searched in case the children had got on board and then couldn't get off for one reason or another. Then we employed a helicopter because it was found that you couldn't do a real tracking of some of the open land and some of the reservoirs. And we could do that with the helicopter. And we searched 4,317 houses, an enormous proportion of the number of houses that were in the area. All the garages, all the sheds, the outhouses, things of that kind that they may have gone into and then found that they couldn't get out. And so it became an enormous inquiry.
Your attention please, this is an official police broadcast. 4 weeks ago today, 2 young children went missing from their home.
There were now 600 police officers hunting for Gary and Susan. Half of London's police dogs were scouring 5,000 acres of local woodland, and over 14,000 people, some of them sex offenders, had been questioned. An air of desperation set in.
These children just didn't disappear off the face of the earth. They must have gone somewhere, and in this area, in my experience, it's the most difficult case, simply because of the lack of information from the very beginning of the inquiry.
As the case proceeded, it became more disquieting to find that nobody had seen them. They'd just been spirited away. We'd got virtually nothing. We were no further forward. So there was a great deal of pressure. Senior officers at the yard and that kind of thing who felt that something must result from this enormous investigation.
For the mothers, there was only the agony of waiting, sleeping in armchairs, fearful of missing a knock on the door. And everywhere, the treasured school photo stares back from beneath that dreadful word, missing.
I couldn't believe it, any of this was going on, because I went everywhere with my children. I went football, fishing, swimming, carol singing. I couldn't believe that somebody would ever be able to get hold of one of my children, you know. I can't cope with it, still can't cope with it. It's like yesterday to me. Still, when there's a knock at my door, I mean, I know he's not coming back, but I still think it's going to be him, you know, or when my phone rings and my heart misses a beat, I think, oh, it's him.
78 days after they disappeared, Gary and Susan were found dead in a hide in a copse less than 2 miles from Gary's home. The bodies were badly decomposed, suggesting the children died very soon after they went missing.
They were found by a private individual who was out with his dog.
Just how close were they together? There's one report that they were almost in each other's arms.
They were close together.
Susan had got her arm around Gary's body. They looked as though they were cuddling up for warmth, and the newspapers immediately caught on with this and said that they died of hypothermia, and they tagged the case as the Babes in the Wood case. And this was a bit unfortunate, really, as far as I was concerned, because it simplified the whole situation, and rather than look at it as it was.
Whatever the press speculation, Nipper had a more pressing question. How had the bodies in the copse been missed?
I wanted to know exactly who had searched it, and I found that it had been searched on the 9th of April by 3 officers with their dogs.
That was just 10 days after the children had disappeared. The forensic evidence lost was a disaster, and Nipper summoned the dog handlers to get some answers.
Because this copse was so wildly overgrown, they couldn't walk the dogs through as they normally did on the lead, so they let them free range. So the dogs ran in there, and eventually they came out the other side when they were called by their handlers. But my concern was that they didn't find the bodies. And you know, one of the questions that I posed was, what does your dog do when he finds a human body like that? And one of them said, well, I don't know. And the other one said, well, I think it might just sit there.
As a result of this blunder, new dog training techniques were introduced. But it was a mistake that helped a child killer to escape justice for 30 years and kill again. This is the copse where the bodies of Gary and Susan were found in a hide. It's been 32 years since Nipper Read last climbed this hill. Back then, the press said the children died of the cold, but Nipper was in no mood to jump to conclusions.
I knew that they were my children. They were found late at night, and there was nothing that could be done at that time. And so I came up early the next morning. We'd had to mark the path through because it was so extensively overgrown. The bodies were found more or less over the other side of the copse, but this was always the way that we went in. It was so overgrown that, you know, one couldn't walk upright. It was almost impossible for the sunlight to penetrate. It was like a very sinister kind of place. When I found the hides and saw the state of the bodies, and it was really very, very depressing.
Even though he had never heard the word paedophile, Nipper was convinced he was looking at a murder scene. Today, there would be no shortage of expert advice to support his instincts. The preparation of the hide as a killing field, the posing of the bodies in an embrace, even the choice of victim is a clue.
The most violent offender is the person who takes a stranger, because the victim can turn sort of violent, they can scream. Now, faced with a very dynamic situation like that, they will be more concerned with the control of the victim because they will want to extend the time with the victim. So it's in those particular cases you will find that they will use outbuildings, garages, hides, areas which are isolated, which they know they have full control of the victim, and they know that the victim knows they've got full control of them. And what we also see with this type of offender is that even though they've got access to somebody that they know within a family, they know that that victim would not accept that level of behaviour against them. So they will go outside to offend against a stranger.
Nipper Read believed Susan and Gary had been snatched off the street and murdered. But the bodies had been attacked by animals and were so badly decomposed it was impossible to establish a cause of death, let alone whether they had been sexually assaulted or strangled.
As far as I was concerned, these two children had been murdered. It never attracted me, the thought that they just cuddled up in this little hide and went to sleep and died of hypothermia. They would have wanted to go home, they would have seen the lights which were a direction for them, and they would have gone off and gone home. They were never babes in the wood, these two children. They were two victims. But of course I couldn't prove that because there was no physical evidence.
I just knew they didn't go up there and die. I mean, what two children would go up and lay in a copse for days on end, hungry, starving, frightened of the dark? You knew damn well it wasn't right.